接下来我们这节目做的宁美上总的我们进步了比较多，包括讨论参多什么都东北特别讲了给上头的讲是我在你这个。자고 듣기 전에 연락만 지금 번조자라 소란도 공기 똑반 버려 신질로 데르터 컨섬 코르버스나와나 야르 트르제장금 남고때 조비톤도 드블라 노르베진 쯧나 제버 잡던 지브름젓 남캄 타글레 셈친 장남스 디옥섬 겨르바 디옥섬 겨르바 돈친 잡발레 장들 돈베 찌르들비 찌르 레지 디데랍터 돈바너 돈바이 준 건도 정보냐 토마미 피티스 샹쳔네 추르킹안레 롱클 흔저베 특송스케이 센화스մ 찌르네 조지그나 오네스 셈친 돈잣장 디랑 돈타메 프르직바레 캬브르멈진지르텐 돈잣바 추르키야네 특보 코피장 라나고스르 남미 고토 추베런친 바마냥부 gembandır long şudur zorke nevreftemba ne jadan nyambu meto gembarte memjedim bim çıkıp çı yirdir çandan jamnyam jeng jamnyam jengi Jamnya jengi jandır. Jamnya jengi şma? Ha? Jamnya jengi sajan tergemba. Jamnya jengi sajan tergemba wo tenar number namzı da kancım so tüye çongçiki pardon kebrajı te yogusu te yogu ka tamçıdını te yuvar bir ka tamçıdını puçir genbep tertan san gejan jamedu jondep kotpe ngum tomzatcan 냠적당날 부치 겸소레 pardon 야친 zemj хугир тер рере jan kama хугмед гне кябр zemj уимир таңды штонсым нешер царыңапсаг марте панцын жамед загу верким жын таңбу хвармжон гозыр намтага жан ниба бабму хварти гямбарте сымбарын чын янның көпі жан жыба мето сырмап жамбарте ngabagi var natsуқтық би жан чыгба мето шындыр гепи жан Дымба яңдығым жоңғы ғызып жыдық яң гепа жаян мазыды жоғбы не гөбақ дұржыр емсім жыбаны Рнан бір рнан еніп жықчығырнан вім доғып жығни баны рнан таңғы деп жықсым мүмжідің жігіртен камды ей шәрна кердің лона артық бадың нымна ардыржыр шыңна 용дағы жаң ыртыңна гоғу чуачымеді жывжы бап жорыңа баны рынчынып гембей жамп жыржық ырдыржырып жывдың тағы бір рнан
Let us begin our class on the wish-fulfilling treasury. I think you're aware that listen to the wish-fulfilling treasury at this degenerated age is very difficult, especially such a profound Mahayana teaching, which integrates both Sutrayana and Vajrayana teachings so perfectly. It is indeed very difficult and quite rare. So we should cherish this opportunity and be very joyful. Initially, I had the aspiration to give this teaching to as many people as possible. But now I think even if a group of you would be able to finish listening to this teaching, or even if you were to listen to one chapter of it or two chapters of it, that would be really wonderful still. This is my aspiration. The wish-fulfilling treasury as I stated before, it is considered as an encyclopedia of Buddhism, where it talks about the animate and inanimate, the pure and impure, all of the crucial points of Buddhism. These are all clearly stated in this text. Therefore, in order to understand it and study it well, we should supplicate to Venerable Longchenpa. If you're curious about Longchenpa, you should read into his biography, which I also translated into the Chinese language already. Venerable Longchenpa, such a great master, including other teachers such as Mipa Rinpoche. When I read their biography, I feel that they're not as extensive as that of the modern celebrities. So the modern celebrities, they can go on and on about their life, but great masters such as Longchenpa, it seems that his biography is rather quite short and very similar to that of the other masters. For people who studied texts as composed by Mipa Rinpoche or Longchenpa, I'm sure you're very much touched by their sharp wisdom, their great compassion, their skillful means of pointing out the nature of mind. By studying those, I'm sure you already felt that very uncommon dependent arising, that auspicious connection to them. Therefore, whenever we study his text, we should supplicate to him often. Or sometimes we can get a picture or get a statue, though that they're just a form, just a phenomenon. But this kind of picture, this kind of manifestation on the outside, it can definitely bring about the true blessings of true blessings to our mind stream, which lead us to the true meaning of the teachings. Today, let us continue. Previously, we already covered the first chapter where we talked about what needs to be rejected as samsara and need to be accepted as nirvana. Also, we've covered on the world that's manifested, the suffering and the blissful experiences. In the next part, we're going to talk about the various kinds of world that manifest out of the base. Previously, we also covered on the base. Now we're going to talk about the manifest, the Pure Land. The base, in fact, has two aspects. One is manifested and not yet manifested. After manifested, some said that the basic or the primordial base is Buddha nature. But some masters think that Buddha nature is the base that's already manifested. In fact, at the beginning, there is a base. The samsara and nirvana has not separated. And then later, there is the manifestation. So that could be part of the base and the base that manifested. In the Uttara Tantra Shastra, where it talks about the base, some of the teachers some of the masters consider that this kind of Buddha nature is after the samsara and nirvana has already splitted. That is the base for sentient beings. Previously, we've already covered on the primordial base of the manifestation, which is quite clearly stated in this text, and that is the uncommon explanation in the Mahayana teaching, Mahayana Buddhism. So now let's look at the manifested world, which can be explained into two parts. The first one is the brief general explanation of the world that tames, and then the explicit explanation on the Saha world. Now let's look at the first one, which is a brief general explanation of the world that tames and the manifestation of the Supreme Teacher. The world that tames refers to the Pure Land. And then the second part is explicit explanation. And then the third one is to explain the content and the merit that derives from developing faith. So let's look at the first one, which is the general brief explanation on the world that tames and the manifestation of the world. Because the sentient beings are the beings that to be tamed, therefore the Pure Lands are the land or the world that can tame, that tames the sentient beings.
那下面呢，我们就是讲到了这个，我现在只看到那个宋字啊。
I am currently just looking at the verses. I'm not looking at the explanation, the commentary. As I said the other day, this time I am giving you only the teaching and the oral transmission of the verses, but you are responsible to read into the commentaries. If you haven't finished reading this, the commentaries, then it would be the best for you not to attend this class anymore. Next class, I will check your homework. If you haven't finished reading the commentary for even once, then you shouldn't really listen to this class. Let's look at the verses. In such a way, within the samsara of the three domains, out of great compassionate Buddha displays Pure Lands, fulfilling all wishes of beings like a gem, guiding from conditioned existence to nirvana. So in this verse, it says that the three realms are formed out of the three types of habitual tendencies. The numbers of sentient beings are as innumerous as the specks of dust. These sentient beings, what kind of methods they can rely on to attain liberation then? In fact, it is by relying on the great compassionate land that's manifested by the Buddha. The Buddha, by extending his power of great compassion, he could place all the sentient beings onto their adorned land, adorned world. These kinds of world, the Pure Lands, can be manifested. For example, the Pure Lands such as Sukhavati, or the Pure Lands of Vairocana, the Pure Lands of Akshobhya, and so on. By having these kinds of by manifested or created these kinds of Pure Lands, they would be able to benefit sentient beings. Of course, the Buddhas do not have such a coarse conceptual idea to benefit sentient beings. Therefore, I would manifest in the land. Rather, the Buddhas are just like the wish-fulfilling gem. As long as the sentient beings were to supplicate to the wish-fulfilling gem, then naturally they would be bestowed with the fulfillment of their wishes. So it is by the very special power of dependent arising, the Buddhas would lead the sentient beings to liberation. Over here specifically says that by the Buddha's activity or their various kinds of skillful means are to lead the sentient beings to the fruition of nirvana from the three existence. Therefore, according to Avatamsaka Sutra, it says that the Buddha's fields are unfathomable. The Buddhas of the 10 directions understand of the different interests of the sentient beings. By knowing the different tendencies and interests of sentient beings, the Buddhas would radiate the various kinds of Dharma teachings to them, or the Dharma, the ways of Dharma to them. So the different Dharma gates or ways of Dharma would merge into the space. That is why the Buddha would be able to liberate sentient beings with various ways, with myriad ways. And the Buddhas would manifest all kinds of Buddha fields and the manifested forms to liberate the poor sentient beings. According to Avatamsaka Sutra, it also says that not having moved even a bit from their throne, in one thought they would be able to traverse all through the 10 directions. It is of boundless and limitless kalpas. They are constantly liberating sentient beings. So sometimes we feel that the sentient beings are indeed so pitiful, they're suffering so much. But we should know that the Buddhas would definitely liberate them, therefore we don't need to worry too much. On one hand, it seems that the Buddha Dharma is decaying and the sentient beings' mind streams are getting more coarse and violent and ignorant. But on the other, they would have an opportunity to be liberated. How so? Over here, to continue, it says that the sentient beings and worlds of all spaces, there is such a large number of the sentient beings that lives in the worlds of that pervades all space. Sometimes we can't even put that into a number. It is beyond our numbering system. And then it says that the Buddhas of the three times performs all pervasive beneficial activities. The Buddha fields that liberates all sentient beings are the activities of the Buddha, which does not get distracted, just like how the ocean had never parted from the ocean waves, or vice versa. Therefore, to benefit the sentient beings, the Buddha's compassion and his activity would never be interrupted. The supreme teacher of this world tames beings in such methods. These are collected and expounded here. So Longchenpa over here said that, well, in our Saha world, this is the land that's manifested by Shakyamuni Buddha, and let's see how he tames the sentient beings. And some of the teachings are now collected in this text, and he will try his best to expound that teaching to everyone. This is almost like a promise vow, a promise verse in this chapter. So it says that the Shakyamuni Buddha, or the Buddhas of this Kalpa, Dharchana, and all the Buddhas of all the 7 Buddhas that has the close connections to us, they have their ways of expounding the teachings or to liberate sentient beings. There are lots of methods. Why over here Longchenpa said that I will temporarily explain over here? It is because he will try his best to explain the collection of teachings as much as possible at this time. Initially, to expound all the adornments, all the purity, and all the magnificence of all the pure lands of all the directions would be very difficult to be expounded in one text, but he would then give the gist of it. He would give the gist of how we are connected to the Saha world. Therefore, I feel that after studying the wish-fulfilling treasury, lots of the profound teachings that we don't really hear from the Sutrayana teachings would be expounded clearly. So I'm sure you will receive lots of new knowledge from this text. Some of the teachings may sound very new, but if you were to analyze it further, then you would realize the teachings are definitely very much fitting to both Sutrayana and Vajrayana teachings. According to Mipa Rinpoche's textual outline, it is the first one on the explicit explanation on the Pure Land, the second one on the teacher. Now let's look at the first one out of the explicit explanation on the world, on the Pure Land. The first one is on the 3 bodies of the world, and the second one is on the base essence of the flower-adorned Pure Land. So the stanza says that Samadabhadra's wish-fulfilling nature, supreme teacher, attaining liberation at beginningless time, the Dharmakaya spontaneously accomplished Sambhogakaya, manifesting into body, speech, and mind, the 3 bodhisattvas, benefiting sentient beings at the 3 realms, and beginningless and endless, constantly abiding. The first stanza addresses the supreme teacher, the Buddha, which is indivisible from the wisdom Dharmakaya, the wisdom Dharmadhatu, just like the wish-fulfilling gem, which is also Samattabhadra, or the one who has the nature of Samattabhadra. Sometimes whenever we think of Samattabhadra, we think of a Buddha who has the color of blue. Though I have not read this, but according to some texts, it says that the so-called Samattabhadra is someone who attained liberation at the very moment when there is a manifestation from the base, as the one with the sharpest capacity. Is there only one Samattabhadra? Not necessarily. At any moment, if the sentient beings were to attain liberation at the very moment when there is a manifestation out of the base, if they can attain liberation, attain the Bodhi with their personal experience, then that can be called as a Samattabhadra. From the Dharmakaya aspect, there is not necessarily a number associated with it. But any sentient being at any moment, at any time, if they can attain personal liberation, if they can attain liberation with their personal experience and who had never got into samsara, then that person would be able to be called as a Samattabhadra. So that's the method of attaining enlightenment as Samattabhadra. The beginningless time, sometimes in Mahaati, we would call it as the base. From the base, there is the manifestation of a base. We can call that manifestation of base as beginningless, or we can call that there is something as a beginning, but there is nothing that's solidly existent. The Dharmakaya, out of this purity, there is the spontaneous manifestation of the 5 Sambhogakayas. The Sambhogakaya, as that is taught in the Resting the Mind, as well as the Treasury of Dhammadhatu, there are lots of analysis. I'm sure you're quite clear about that. Over here, it talks about the 5 types of Sambhogakaya out of Dharmakaya. Out of the Sambhogakaya, then it manifests the Nirmanakaya. Nirmanakaya, the manifested body, just like the Shakyamuni Buddha. Out of this Nirmanakaya, then there are more and more the myriads of Nirmanakayas, such as the Nirmanakaya of taking rebirth, Nirmanakaya of supreme birth, Nirmanakaya of the various sorts. There are all kinds of Nirmanakayas, and in this Nirmanakaya, in the Nirmanakaya, especially in the Saha world, they would manifest into the 3 types of bodhisattvas of mind, speech, and body. The mind Nirmanakaya is Mahastama Prata, and the speech is Avalokiteshvara, and the body is Manjushri. So we often talk about the 3 protectors, or the 3 main bodhisattvas. Some of them, for example, there are lots of mountains and lots of places associated to these 3 particular bodhisattvas. These 3 represents wisdom, compassion, and power. Whenever we talk about the wisdom, compassion, and power, these are the 3 greatest aspects of the Buddha. You need all 3 of them. That is why the Mahastama Prata has great power. That is why we need to supplicate to all 3 of them. We need to have the great compassion, we need to have great wisdom, and we need to have the great power, so that we won't be destroyed by, we won't be distracted by the obstacles of various sorts, and we will have all kinds of compassion to benefit sentient beings and the wisdom to benefit sentient beings. So these 3 are all extremely important. The 3 Nirmanakayas, they would again manifest into various forms in this animated and inanimate world, especially the 6 realms. They would benefit beings with all kinds of forms. So, in terms of the time of benefiting sentient beings, they're also beginningless and endless. Of course, in the appearance, in this kind of manifestation, there is the manifested birth, there is the manifested death. However, their vow to benefit sentient beings does not end. Therefore, there is no empty kalpa, so to speak. According to Avatamsaka Sutra, it states that the body of the Buddhas are pervaded throughout all Dharmakaya, benefiting sentient beings with a pervasive manifestation. In the Lankavatara Sutra, it also says that by relying on the Dharmakaya, there is Sambhogakaya. From Sambhogakaya arise the Nirmanakaya. But the root is the Buddha. The rest are all the manifestations. So from Dharmakaya, there is the manifestation of Sambhogakaya, and then there is the manifestation of Nirmanakaya. But the three bodies, at the root of the three bodies, indeed, it is the Buddha. Just as stated in the Clear Realization, it states that the nature of the Buddha, this is really the root of the Buddha. If we were to rely on the Buddha, then there are all kinds of manifestations. There are the 21 types of undefilements related to the Dharmakaya of the Buddha, and then the 5 wisdoms and the 3 kayas related to the Sambhogakaya, such as the perfect appearance, and in terms of the wisdom, there is the wisdom of omniscience and the wisdom of knowing the nature of things. In terms of the speech, there is the 60 types of melodious sound. Those are all manifested in front of the sentient beings. So they would use all these kinds of ways to benefit sentient beings. The 3 kayas are the ways that the Buddha would benefit sentient beings. Mainly, this part talks about how the Buddha would benefit beings through the worlds manifested. And then the next textual outline is on the base essence of flower-adorned world, which is similar to Avatamsaka Sutra, to the description of the Avatamsaka world. This Tibetan Pecha binder I have here used to be very commonly seen in the past. But nowadays, I think people just use the modern bookbind books now. I used this particular Pencha for lots of years, for many, many years, in front of listening to the classes in front of Ponsog Rinpoche. That is why it looks quite dirty. But out of nostalgic reasons, I don't want to wash it. If I carry it among people, I think they would feel that this is quite dirty. Is it? Now let's continue to look at the explanation on the flower essence world. Especially within the Saha world domain, out of the domain of the Dharmakaya, there is the densely arrayed world, self-manifesting luminous light that radiates 5 colors. So this flower essence world is the world belongs to the Sambhogakaya Pure Land. Whenever we look into, for example, the Chinese esoteric schools, when it comes to the Kriya Tantra, they place great importance to to Vairochana, and then lots of the Chinese monasteries also they would value Vairochana Buddha. Some of the great masters would say that Vairochana Buddha is no different than the Shakyamuni Buddha, and some said that they're different. But the way we should understand it is that in front of us, the sentient beings, one of them is the Sambhogakaya form, and the other one is the Nirmanakaya form. Of course, the teachings between the Soba school and the Longchenpa school is a little bit different. But in general, we would say that Vairochana Buddha is the representative of the 5 Sambhogakaya Buddhas because he sits in the center. And his manifestation, the Nirmanakaya form, is the Shakyamuni Buddha. We would usually say that the Dharmakaya is Samantabhadra, and then the Sambhogakaya is Vairochana, the Nirmanakaya is the Shakyamuni Buddha. So in this world, that is the Saha world, the Buddha would benefit the Saha world, first of all, from the Dharmakaya domain. There is infinite manifestations, and out of the infinite manifestations, there is the infinite Sambhogakaya worlds that's manifested, which then radiates the infinite light. Over here, it hasn't really talked about Sambhogakaya yet, but it started to talk about the Vairochana in the conditional Pure Land, whom can radiate infinite light. He could also manifest the infinite Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. But this Buddha and Bodhisattva are the self-manifested Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are manifested within his own inside or his own experience. It is not manifested on the outside. It is not of a different entity. It is also similar to the cloud offering of Samantabhadra. The Dharmakaya then manifests the infinite Sambhogakaya. Sambhogakaya manifests the infinite light, and each of the light would manifest the infinite Pure Lands. The infinite Pure Lands would benefit infinite sentient beings. With that self-manifested light, which radiates 5 colors, which is the infinite light, that manifested from self. We would say that those are the kind of manifestation that represents the 5 Buddhas, the 5 Buddhas. In the Chinese esoteric school, and then sometimes in the Avatamsaka school, they place a great importance on the Avatamsaka world. Lots of the sadhanas, liturgies are different than the other common vehicle schools. According to the Brahmajala Sutra, there is also a description of the flower essence world, but that flower essence world is a bit different, where it says that the Buddha then traveled from the east to Tushita, and then from Tushita to give teachings to the assembly of Maras, and then later went to the Jambudvipa. But that flower essence world is a little different than this one over here. In the Tantrayana teachings, there are some uncommon ways of describing the Buddha's descent and giving the teachings. For example, the Buddha first attained full liberation, full enlightenment at the bank of Niranjana, and then later benefited sentient beings to the celestial realm, and then later descend to the human realm to benefit sentient beings. There's also the teaching like such. Let's look at the outline over here. The first one says that the general and specific Pure Lands are the manifestation of the teacher, and the second one is to eradicate one's doubt. Longchenpa's style is to use the debate and analysis as well as Vajrayana teaching into the Sutrayana teaching so that he can explain very clearly. So let's look at the first verse. Over here it says that the perfect enjoyment body as a close support, the precious lotus essence adorned Pure Land, the flower adorned ground and essence pure world, equivalent to to the hundred and the thousands of Sahara world, numbering as much as dust, the magnificent world. Previously, we've already talked about Vairochana Buddha, and now over here discusses the world that supports Vairochana Buddha. So what's the world that Vairochana Buddha lives in? The description is that this is the world that's named as the jewel lotus essence adornment world, or adornment pure land. It is just as the lotus, it is perfect, it is pure. That's the world that he lives there. This is also in the commentary. Another way of calling this particular world is called flower-adorned ground and essence adornment pure world. There's another way to describe it. It means that there are so many different worlds, so many different pure lands. So this so-called flower essence world is not just like one country, for example, Canada, or to some countries. It's not like that. In fact, there are so many different pure lands, as many as the numbers of dust. There's another description. It says that it's equivalent to hundreds and thousands of the Saha world's dusts in number. We know how many dusts we have in one Saha world. Those of you who studied Sutrayana, you should know that the sun and the moon and the four continents, including the desire realm, if we were to count all of these to 1,000 and these as number one, and then count it again to 1,000, that is the middle thousandfold world. In the middle thousand world count as one, and then keep on increasing to the 3,000 great thousand world. And then that's the Sambhogakaya Pure Land of a Sambhogakaya Buddha, which means in one Saha world, of course I'm not saying that the Jambuvipa that we live in, but in one world, or the world that we think, rather it talks about the hundreds of thousands of billions of worlds calling as one Saha world. And the innumerable Saha worlds, as much as innumerable Saha world like that, as many as the specks of dust, then this is called the flower essence world. So whenever you're listening to the wish-fulfilling treasury, you have to have a very open mind, and it's quite unfathomable for you to even imagine it. On the other hand, I know many of you studied astronomy, then in your mind there's the infinite cosmos and infinite worlds and planets and so on. But still, I think the teachings of Buddhism, the philosophy of Buddhism transcends that. It is very much beyond that. Therefore, we have to be very aware not to measure the Buddhist cosmology with our dualistic mind. Otherwise, it is just like to measure the worlds with the eye of a needle. Our dualistic mind is very limited. We're just simply looking into the little cell phones. For example, sometimes I think to myself, well, look at the cell phone. This cell phone can manifest so many things in it. But this is still made by Steve Jobs and lots of the engineers. They're mundane people. For audience like us, whenever we look at this phone, we would feel that it's unfathomable how things could transfer onto my phone, and we can see so much things like that. And then when we use that similar thinking to the flower essence world, this infinite infinite cosmos in this description, I think it is far more unfathomable than the cell phone. In terms of Avatamsaka Sutra, it also describes that world. In the 60 Avatamsaka or 80 volumes of Avatamsaka, or even some of the depictions, some of the pictures and murals that's painted, they're quite amazing. According to the Avatamsaka Sutra, it also states that in each one of the speck of dust, there is infinite numbers of Buddha fields. In each of the speck of dust, there is infinite pure lands, and in infinite pure lands, there is infinite Buddhas. Infinite Buddhas leading their infinite retinues and infinite retinues to benefit infinite sentient beings in infinite worlds. Whenever we talk about that, it sounds like we're talking about some kinds of imaginary stories, because it's so difficult for our limited dualistic mind to even fathom a tiny bit of that infinite wisdom. However, with our development of our listening and contemplation and development of understanding of the Avatamsaka world, then we would say that, this Buddha world, this Buddha field is indeed unfathomable. It is indeed incredible. The Buddha's blessings and the Buddha's merits is indeed unimaginable. And then we would develop that kind of faith. Whenever we talk about cosmology, whenever we talk about infinity, we would definitely feel that the wisdom or the compassion of Buddhism, it is quite unfathomable. And the wisdom of human beings at this stage has not developed to that stage at all. Back in the time of Shakyamuni Buddha, human wisdom definitely have not developed till that we have now. But the Buddha's teaching has already reached that level. So I think people who study astronomy, if you delve into the sutra such as Avatamsaka Sutra, especially on the chapter of Vairocana, I think you might be able to find some useful information for your research. I'm not sure how the Avatamsaka Sutra is propagated in mainland, but I know some of them spend 5 years or even more years on the expounding of the Avatamsaka Sutra. I really hope that in the future, all of you can develop the habit to enjoy giving teachings, to enjoy listening to teachings of the Dharma. As mundane beings, we have so many bad habits that's based on the 3 poisons. We should try our best to eradicate them. We have tried our best to eradicate all of those with all kinds of methods, even to punish yourself whenever you have an unvirtuous thinking. Because the 3 poisons or the 5 poisons, they could lead to horrid consequences. Therefore, while we're studying the Dharma, I really hope that you don't squander your time. After spending the same amount of time sitting here, some people have truly received the profound teaching of the Dharma. Some of them, not only they did not receive it, their mind continuum become more and more violent and ignorant and more coarse. Since we're in this world, it would be quite a pity not to use this body to study the Mahayana teaching, as Buddhist practitioners, it's easy to practice all kinds of rituals, such as prostration and burn incense and so on. It's easy to be drawn to the teachers, to spiritual guidance, to spiritual mentors. I think there are lots of opportunities as such, but what's more important than any of those is the profound teaching of Mahayana, especially since many of you are so young. Even if you're not that young, I'm sure at a later time you will have some opportunity to propagate Dharma. Even if you don't have that opportunity, by studying the Mahayana teaching will definitely plant a wonderful seed in your alaya, in your mind consciousness, which is really the most precious. Now let's look at the next verse. Over here it says that within it, there sits the Vairochana Buddha, sits cross-legged on the stem. So within this world, there sits the perfectly adorned Sambhogakaya form that is Vairochana Buddha, the representative of the five Buddhas. So he sits on the world that is the flower essence world, and his whole body covers all the lotus flowers. So he sits on that lotus flower in such a way. Out of the pores of this Buddha rains down the fragrant water into the Buddha fields. This is quite unfathomable. So out of each of the pore of the Buddha, there then rains down the fragrant water. The fragrant water are like the ocean. And then it changes into the innumerable Buddha fields. They would use all kinds of ways to benefit the sentient beings. Out of the Vairochana Buddha's body, the fragrant water is drawn, and then the fragrant water turns into infinite world. The infinite worlds then appears infinite Buddhas benefit sentient beings without elaborations. So they benefit the infinite sentient beings. The body of Vairochana Buddha, after the Vairochana's body benefits sentient beings by raining down the fragrant water. And then Vairochana Buddha, on his mudra of samadhi, there is the ocean of fragrant water. On top of the samadhi mudra of Vairochana Buddha, there is a vast ocean of fragrant water. Within it, there is a giant lotus, and in that center of the lotus, there is a great stamen that has many stamens in it, in the center of it. And on each of them, there are infinite Pure Lands staying on them. I remember from the commentary, it says that there are 25 on top and 25 under. It means that the flowers, by layer, the flowers has layers of the 25 layers, and then for each of the layers there are infinite Pure Lands. So on each of the stamen, there are infinite Pure Lands benefiting infinite sentient beings. It is not like the Vairochana Buddha. So Vairochana Buddha is not like Amitabha, where he holds a vase in between, and then in the vase there is only a 5-layered flower petals and there is nothing else. But not like that. In fact, Vairochana Buddha has this infinite world So that is why it's quite important to say that in the center there are the 25 layers. This is very different than that of the other teachings on the view of cosmos. However, this is stated in Avatamsaka Sutra as well. In the Treasury of Supreme Vehicle, in the first chapter, it talks about the 12 perfect Buddhas that can tame the sentient beings. The second chapter talks about also the flower essence world, where there are lots of tantras as quoted. In fact, all of these teachings, or the point of view, are the view of the absolute tantra as well. In the Treasury of Supreme Vehicle, there are 25 chapters, but instead of chapters, he did not use the term chapter, rather he said that there are the 25 levels. So he built one on top of another. So the first one talks about the Buddha that can tame the sentient beings. The second level talks about the flower essence world. The teachings are very similar to this one, but maybe a little bit more brief in that one. The wish-fulfilling treasury is more extensive. So in the stamina of this lotus, there are infinite worlds. And in the center of the stamina, there are 25 levels or 25 layers. Each of the layer or each of the level contains the numbers of specks of dust of the 3,000-fold world. It's quite difficult for us to fathom even. Some of the historians, they're quite interested in this description, especially I think the Westerners, they're very interested in the description of the Avatamsaka world, especially people who are into film and art. They feel that this is quite unfathomable. People nowadays showed lots of interest to the Naga Palace, to the Celestial Realm, and lots of the movies nowadays that they would use those kinds of themes. Anyhow, over here it says that in the center there are the 25 layers of 3,000-fold world. Each of them are formed with the infinite numbers of worlds. So this is within the ocean of fragrant water in the palms of Vajrayana Buddha. The 3,000-fold world, though that there are 25 levels or 25 layers, but out of each layer there are different colors, just like brocade. Whenever we look at brocade, there are different colors, different shapes. So in the 25 levels, each and every of the world's shapes, colors, appearances, they're completely different. On our brocade, we see all kinds of magnificent patterns, each of which are different. So the 25 levels, so each of the 25 levels are very different, though that some of the depictions, they showed everything, or they painted everything exactly the same. Now I want to show you these pictures of the Avatamsaka world depicted in Avatamsaka Sutra. it's an illustration. I think the Chinese tradition of the flower essence world has 20 levels instead of 25. I picked two different illustrations. One of them has the names of the Tathagatas and the other ones without. These are included in some very old books, some ancient books, and some of them are the copies of the wood-carved boards. But I made some comparisons. Some of this, for example, we have 25 levels that's described over here, and the 13th is the Saha world. I think some of them are similar. Both of them, for example, both of the descriptions of saying the 13th level is the Saha world is exactly the same. But some of the names of the higher level and the lower levels are a little bit different, especially the first and second. According to the Chan text, the Mind Mirror, it says that the flower essence world, where it describes the infinite worlds, should be accepted by one through faith, because that kind of unfathomable world can only be accepted through faith rather than our conceptual mind. It states that the insights and the realization of the flower essence world can be practiced through only wisdom and faith, but not our conceptuality. If one were to use the conceptuality of the sentient beings to fathom the flower essence world, it would be extremely difficult. Therefore, when we first heard of the description of the flower essence world, I believe it would be difficult to accept it. But slowly and slowly, if you read into the Avatamsaka world and read into the Avatamsaka Sutra of the Vairochana chapter and some of the liturgies and sadhanas in Chinese esoteric schools, it would be easier. Now, the next part we will quickly go through the levels. There are 25 levels. So the first level is called the glorious arisen light, Pure Land. And I believe the Tathagata of this world is the undefiled light. I recommend you to read into the commentary. It's very clear over there. And then the second one is, the second level is the lotus adornment Pure Land. I believe the Buddha's name is the lion's pure light Buddha. The third level is the jewel adornment Pure Land. And then the fourth one is a scattered flower Pure Land. The fifth one is all virtue Pure Land. In the commentary, there are the various Buddha's name also added to it. And then the sixth one is abundant flowers Pure Land. Then I believe the Buddha was the autonomous sound Tathagata. The seventh level is the truthful reason radiant dignity filled Pure Land, and the Buddha is the wisdom ocean Buddha. The eighth one is the inexhaustible melodious sound Pure Land, and then the Buddha was radiant invincible Buddha. The ninth one is indestructible victorious banner Pure Land. Then the Buddha is the noble king Buddha. The 10th one is the great sunlight Pure Land, the infinite Dharma nature Buddha. The 11th one is the bright color Pure Land. I believe it's the Brahma king Buddha. Then the 12th is the luminous, it's the pure light, Pure Land, and then the Buddha was luminous adornment Buddha. Then the 13th one is the Saha world. So today we're not going to get into Saha world. Tomorrow we'll talk about our Saha world.